Which happened a lot. It did. These guys, when they went to learn how to use these things, they didn't want to wait forever. These were young men who wanted to have their first duel by the time they're, a strapping 15. It was the masters who studied and looked at all the manuals. The Irish guys don't want to go through this pretty fast. And if you're not paying attention, you're going to get killed. So John's going to prevent himself from dying. He knows that I have no common sense. I'm going to simply put my sword forward, saying, oh. He's moved his sword into a position to support it. He's turned his knuckle and what's called the true edge of the blade towards mine. He's gained leverage over it, and I've actually impaled myself. I made a big mistake. I didn't gain leverage. I launched myself, and I can't change my mind. He's now going to demonstrate something called the incartado, which is the sword that all right. He's going to purposely bait his chest out. Again, I'm not experienced. I see that open. I'm like, oh, I can stab this dude. I get set. Did not work. He did it, what's called an incartata. It's when you stand in front of the opponent, you expose your chest, your back foot goes here, you throw your arm back, and you say, rock star. That's really in the book. You're a big English man. All right. I'm in college. I must be college. He pushes my sword over. Which we often see. I can do something called cabazione, which is a disengage. I simply take my blade and I go from one side to the next, and I start. Demonstrate again. I try to push it over.
No, it's going to be so slow.
If he tries to stab me, and I decide to push too far over, he can pass and grab my wrist. Yeah, pretty cool. And I am stabbed. In that case, it's not a launch; it's a stab. Well done, sir. Parts of the sword: pullions, guard, pommel, poignard. Also known as the forte or the weak. Strong. Right? So rapier fighting looks a lot different than longsword fighting. But I know something. When I fought with the longsword, remember how you killed me in like one move? And in rapier, it's the same thing. Everything's done in one move. That's why you don't see it in film. No one wants to watch. Done! And the villain's dead. Nobody wants to see that. So they've changed sword fighting in film to be longer and take more time. They do big, broader movements of times. The rapier eventually lost its use. Guns became more popular for dueling. These were great. You guys could go behind a barn with seconds and have at each other. And the pistol took over. It became America's favorite dueling weapon. Although the Europeans were so arrogant, they never bothered to check what we were doing. And they said, we heard you Americans use dynamite. They honestly believe we lit sticks of dynamite. No. We didn't use pistols. Can you name an American president who has over 9 bits of metal in it? He's under $20 bill. Yes, Andrew Jackson got in lots of duels. When he became president, they said you have to stop doing that. Like, oh, all right. They started encouraging young people to. And they would feel guilty when they died. The rapier was eventually retired. He was turned into a smaller sword. These things got so long, people began to bang into people as they were walking. Right? Yeah, it's a stool. So the King of France and a couple others said, we're going to have some ordinances that you have to have a blade that's much smaller. And you'll see George Washington. Napoleon had one. It was one was recently sold in a museum for $33 million. Bought by a family relative. It was impressive. Right? These things went away, and they came up with some other weapons that were still used in warfare, even though we were in the age of gunpowder. This is the saber. It is a Polish saber. It has a deep curve. It later became the military saber used on horseback all throughout up until World War I. And you guys have seen war horse. They all have like big sabers, right? Also popular in the Atlantic area. This thing here is called a thumb ring. Protects my thumb, allows me to roll the blade. Okay. So the mulleting. By spinning the sword around, able to cut people. This was popular in the 1600s in Poland, while Italians like the rapiers, Poles like the big sabers. This was better for military purposes, so this endured all the way to the modern era. The rapier went away. The saber is a much more cinematic looking fight. Now this one's aluminum, this one's steel, so we're not going to pack these together too much with the other ones. But essentially what happens is if John makes an attack at me, and they can be rammed, just like we did with the sword. I respond, and he does the same thing, and we go back and forth. And it looks really fancy, and the crowd is like, oh, I want to see more of that. But that'll eat up that, so I can't do that. So it's really neat stuff. They had a game. If I know this is a Highland festival, then I better do something special. In Great Britain, there was a game called Single Stick. What they did is they took a leather handle like so, put a big stick in it, and used it as a practice weapon. What was their practice weapon? Swords, right? Whether it be a saber or one of those little Highland broadswords, right? Or back swords, what they called back then. That's what it's for. They used it for training purposes, but they also played a game. And this game was for the lower classes, it was not for the nobility. What the game was, John and I would face off. We could not use our spare hand against each other. We fight, and whoever could draw each blood on the head won. We went up to like $5. The game of Single Stick is a great saber training practice. Eventually the weapon got lighter and smaller, and it was actually in the Olympics in 1904. But it was so tiny and thin, it became pretty much like sport fencing, and they kind of lost the hacks and the cuts because the weapon was so light, you could just hack it at it. This is much heavier. This is not easy. It looks easy. It isn't easy. Nothing. Oh, wow. Right. So Single Stick became a very popular weapon and tool to use for training purposes. We have manuals from it. Scotland doesn't have a lot of literature when it comes to sword fighting. It's not until the 1700s that. Were you guys here for the Prince Charlie stuff? Sound it? When around that time period, Scotsmen started traveling abroad as mercenaries, and then after their experiences, writing down what was good sword fighting. So there's a guy called McBain who came up with a universal sword fighting system. So it works for everything. There's another guy that's anonymous. We know he's Scottish, but he's a Highland regiment officer. He came up with how to use single stick. So we actually got manuals from Scotland. What we do as a society is our job is to not just pretend sword fighting. It's not like a movie. We look at actual manuals, whether it be Fiore di Liveri's longsword, Gigante's rapier, Stars Wesky's Polish saber, or a McBain single stick. And we try to recreate these systems and bring them back to life. It's been done before. It was done by a nice old gentleman by the name of Albert Hutton. Unfortunately, he was more interested in sport fencing. And once England got into that, they put their historical stuff away. And then World War I came along and killed everybody. Right? That was interested in that kind of stuff. There was definitely a turn away from martial arts after that. Recently in the 90s and 2000s, this has come back again, and that's what our society is doing today. So that's just a little demo of the various sword systems that we use, ranging from the 1400s all the way to the modern era. We'll be doing sparring out there next to the caber tossing and whatnot. We have also some cousin groups around here who will be sparring as well. So thank you so much. It's a quick presentation. This is your chance to ask questions. Yes, sir.
I understand there's a lot of tradition about making swords,
yes,
amongst the makers, and proper technique, proper fighting. But there's got to be, if there's proper technique, there's got to be bad technique. Is there any dirty tricks?
Yes.
That are considered
yes
out of bounds?
Yeah. Not out of bounds. There are bad ideas. Right here.
So I'm talking about like ungentlemanly fighting.
Oh, you want ungentlemanly fighting?
Yes. Stuff that would be looked down upon by someone.
Yes, I'll show you.
Maybe you could probably do better with it than I could.
It's easy to do. That was a problem. And the masters complained about it. They're like, it's so easy, you don't become a good sword fighter. You can defeat the hand. If you're clever and you know what that's doing, hands can't bend backwards. Well, my hand can't bend backwards. So if he gets his sword on the other side of my hand, I die. We as human beings have a hard time doing two things at once. So if he stabs on the outside of my hand while I'm trying to grab, I usually won't take it. So we consider it a bad technique. Anything towards the leg was considered a unsafe technique. It's not only a dirty trick, but more importantly, it's unsafe. So I'm going to try to cut John in the leg. I see his leg down there, sword's up in my face, and I'm like, all right, I'm going to just come in and I'm just going to cut his chin. Oh! That's a little hard. So he pulled his leg back. It's called a slipping of the leg. It shows up in rapier, either like so, or with a full cast back. Right? It shows up in longsword, it shows up in saber. We have definite pictures of it in all three categories. So another dirty trick, or another dirty trick, an unsafe technique. The other one was called feinting, and that's when you pretend to strike somewhere and go somewhere else. And in rapier, why that's really dangerous, we ask somebody in the audience, you sir, why would it be dangerous to feint and then strike somewhere else?
Because you might be stabbed during your feint motion.
Oh my gosh, I just randomly picked this guy, you knew it. Yes, sure enough. As I pretend to strike at John, you realize it's not real, he just kills me. Right? Feints have to be so realistic that the guy will actually parry and do something, you're just going to die. So it would be a bad technique. Does that kind of answer some of your questions? Oh wait, I have other dirty tricks, you can't tell anybody. Fiore de Livieri, his book was not only on longsword, but it was also on various weapons, including a poleaxe, which is a stick with a hammer in it. And he wrote in this book, he said, it was to a noble, he's like, I know you would never use these dirty tricks. These are true dirty tricks. But I want to talk about them anyways.